everyone. Welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. This video is Lesson 7. We're covering page 12 and 13 in the book today. The song, It's a Small World. And if you look at the top of page 12 over on the right, it says use after page 73. So that's if you are following along the lessons in the Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. After page 73 in that book is when you're going to want to start It's a Small World and not before. And I even recommend perhaps even starting a little bit later after page 73 because I find that wherever you're at in that book, in this case page 73, these pieces right here are actually going to be a lot more challenging than when you're at there. Certainly a lot more busy work involved in this series. So you may want to wait even a little bit later. And then page 113 in parenthesis there, that's if you're using the all-in-one series. You'll want to wait till page 113. All right, so let's dive on in. And the first thing we want to look at the very beginning is our key signature. We are in the key of G major. So you see 1 sharp. Now, technically, that doesn't mean it's G major. It could be E minor. But the reason we know it's G major is if you go to the very end of the piece, in the bass clef, the very last note at the bottom of page 13 is a G. So that confirms that it is indeed G major. But in the end, it really doesn't matter if you know if you're in G major or E minor. What matters is that 1 sharp, which is an F sharp, and that all Fs are going to be sharped unless marked otherwise with a natural. There are a few of those F naturals in this piece. The other thing we want to see at the beginning is the time signature, which is 4/4 time. So that means there's 4 beats per measure. But if you look throughout the piece, you'll see several eighth notes. So that means you're not just going to be counting 1, 2, 3, 4, but you're going to be breaking it down into half beats. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, so that we can be more precise. The left hand and right hand both have the melody. Now, the majority of it is in your right hand. The left hand actually begins the piece with some melody, and then every now and then it comes back in, which is pretty common with the pieces in this book so far. They're designed in a way that the melody is actually going back and forth between the hands. So because of that, sometimes I like to take both hands together. But this piece is pretty challenging to do that right off the bat. And like I said, most of your melody is in the right hand anyways. So I'm going to start today with just our right hand. And if you notice, the very first measure, the right hand isn't even playing. There's a quarter rest. Well, a quarter rest is only 1 beat. So that means this is an incomplete measure at the very beginning. The last measure at the bottom of page 13 is 3 beats. And so the beginning of the piece, there is beat 4. So when we do count the very beginning of this piece, you're actually not going to be counting 1 and, but you're going to be counting 4 and then the next measure, that's your downbeat, back on beat 1. So I'm going to go ahead and call that first measure, measure 1, even though it's not technically a full measure, but just to avoid confusion, I'm going to call that measure 1, and then the next 2 measures on this top line, measures 2 and 3. So that being said, your right hand comes in on beat 2 in measure 2. Now this is where I'm going to recommend that you start your right hand for this piece in this position. You could kind of call it an E position in a way. So what you're going to do is put E on the, your thumb on E, and notice my 2 is already on F sharp, not F, because all Fs are sharped. And then I have 3 on G, 4 on A, and 5 on B, which, by the way, is our starting note. So you could start the piece just thinking, okay, 5 on B. But if you look at the first 2 measures here that the right hand plays on, this is actually a good outline. So I recommend when you start this piece to already have your right hand in this position. And that'll cover these first 2 measures. So like I said, you rest on beat 1, and then you've got 5 on B, it's a quarter note, and then 3 on G. So you got that little skip, an interval of B down to G. And then you've got 2/8 notes there on beat 4. A, B. In the next measure, repeat that. I'm sorry, A, G, excuse me. The next measure, repeat that G on beat 1, and then you have 2 F sharps on beats 2 and 3, and then you rest on beat 4. Going down to the next line in measure 3, the whole hand is going to change position. You're sort of in the E position now. You're going to go down to the D position. So this is going to outline these next 2 measures. So your right hand rests on beat 1, and it comes in 5 on A on beat 2. And then on beat 3, you have F sharp. And then 2/8 notes, G, F sharp. And then the next measure, your second finger should be on E. And then your thumb on both of these Ds. And then you rest on beat 4. On measure 5, you rest, and then you've got a jump up. Your second finger comes up to G. And you have 2/8 notes here, G and A, with your third finger on that A. And then you have 2 notes played together on beat 3, F natural with your thumb, and B with the fourth finger. So when we're going slow like that, that sounds a little odd, but it's correct. So again, on beat 2, you have 2 on G, 3 on A, and then the F and the B, 1 and 4. Now on beat 4, you've got A and G, so you're going back down. 3 on the A, 2 on the G. Stay right there in measure 6. You've got to rest on beat 1, and your third finger should be right there on this A. And then you have a B right after it. So 2/8 notes, A, B, and then 5 on C. And then 2/8 notes on beat 4, back down, B, A, and then rest on measure 7. And then you have quarter notes, just going down the scale. 5 on C, 4 on B, 3 on A, and the last measure of that line, 2 on G. That's a whole note, so you're going to hold that for a little while, 4 counts. Down on measure 9 on the bottom line, this is where the chorus begins. This is like the main part of the piece that everyone really knows. You're on G right now with your second finger. When you get to measure 9, you're going to want to shift over 1. Bring your thumb up to that G. So you're in this G position. You're actually going to be there for this entire chorus. So that's kind of nice. You're not going to want to move your hand at all. So you've got 2 G's in a row in measure 9, but look at the rhythm. Dotted quarter note, which is a beat and a half, followed by an 8th note. So that rhythm is 1 and 2 and 3 and. So on beat 3 here, your third finger comes up to B, and then you're going to go back down to the G on beat 4. In measure 10, you've got that same rhythm on A for the first 2 beats. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So measure 10 is all A's. Measure 11, you're still on the A, playing the same rhythm in the first 2 beats. So 1 and 2 and 3 and. So you're jumping up to your fourth finger on C here on beat 3, and then you come back to A on beat 4. At the top of page 13, measure 12, your third finger should be right there for B. Again, the same rhythm, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Measure 13, you're still on the B. Again, pretty much the same rhythm, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So there, after the B's, you jump up to D with your fifth finger, back to B at the end of that measure, and then your fourth finger is going to be on C in the last measure, 1 and 2 and 3 and. Now this is a little different. The last 2 notes on beat 4 are 8th notes, B, A. When you get to measure 15 on the second line, you rest. It almost feels like it should go B, A, G, but you rest and then you do the opposite. You come up. Now here, this is a little tricky. You've got C and D, but they're played with our weaker fingers, 4 on the C, 5 on the D. Now it's underneath a slur, so it's suggesting that this is to be played smooth. I'm not going to really suggest that. I don't want it to be really choppy, but it needs to be very clean, and these are weak fingers. So there's a couple things you can do if you're struggling with getting these notes to play evenly. So one, you want to make sure you're using your fingertips and you're not flat-fingered. So that requires curving the fingers, again, like you're holding a ball. So when you curve your fingers like that, now you get more control. So, and instead of trying to play it really smooth, I would keep it kind of light. And there's a couple of reasons for that are very specific to this measure in this song. One, if you play it kind of light, it's going to make it more clear and a little bit cleaner. The other thing is, this measure, the left hand actually has the melody. This isn't melody. This is background. So another reason for it to be light, you don't want it to be too loud and overtake the left hand's melody. So by keeping it softer, which is a good thing musically, I believe it's actually going to make it a little bit easier to play. So that's on 2 and. So you've got the rest on 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you've got a quarter note with those same 2 notes. And then in measure 16, you have a full G chord for 4 counts. When you get to measure 17 at the end of the second line, you're back to the beginning again. This is the exact same thing you had in the beginning. So that means going down to your E position. And you have a quarter rest on beat 1, and then it's 5 on B, 3 on G, and then you have A, G, and then measure 18, a G again, F sharp, F sharp. So this is the same melody, again, that you had at the beginning. So at the end of 18, you've got a rest. 19, you've got a rest. Bring the hand down to the D position, 5 on A, 3 on F sharp, and then G, F sharp, and then the last measure, E, D, D, rest, measure 21, rest, jump up to 2 on G, and these are eighth notes, so G, A, and here's that F natural with B again. Then you go back to A, G, stay right there, rest in 22, 3 on A, 4 on B, C, back down to B, A, and here it's a little different. In 23, take your thumb down to D. Now that's a half note. I don't think we've had half notes yet. Just a couple, actually, we have. But so remember, it's going to be 1 and 2 and then on beat 3, you've got another half note. It's an E and a C. So you got to jump up a little bit. Your thumb's on D. Bring your thumb over to E and take the pinky to C. Now this same interval, this interval is a 6. E to C is 6 white keys apart. With 1 and 5 as our fingering, you're going to use the same interval and fingering going on in measure 24. Just go down 1 note. So in 24, bring this position down 1 note each to D and B for 2 counts. Do the same thing again for C and A for 2 counts. And then 25, once again, bring it down to B and G. So there's a little pattern. Starting on the E and C at the end of 23, so same intervals, same fingering. Now at 25, you've got a quarter rest on beat 3, and then you've got a jump here, a pretty big jump. So here you are on B, 5 on G. Your thumb needs to come up to the G. So the thumb comes up to G, and your third finger's on B. So you have a G and a B, but these are eighth notes, so they're going to go pretty quick. G and B, and then 2 and 4 on A and C. And then the last measure, you have a B and D, which is a staccato. So this is really working the fingers here. 1 and 3 on G and B. 2 and 4 on A and C, 3 and 5 on B and D, but it's staccato. So they're smooth until you get there. Now the staccato is helpful because look at your very last group of notes. You have a B and G in the right hand after this rest, but it has an 8 VA, which means an octave higher. So it's written here, but you're going to play it up here. So you need to jump. Well, luckily, you have the staccato. Use the bounce to your advantage to jump up. Now, I'm afraid I won't nail the notes for you. There's no shortcut there. You're just going to have to memorize this. The only connection is there's a B here, and you're going to a B up the octave. Unfortunately, your third finger's on this B. Your thumb is going to this B. So you're just going to have to go back and forth practicing this. Now, one way you can do this to really get better at it is to practice it with your eyes closed. And when you do that, you're sort of forced to feel around for the black keys and listen. So you're engaging your other senses. It doesn't have to be perfect. The cool thing about it is if you try that a few times and you go back and open your eyes, it actually gets easier. So basically what we've done is just make it harder so that what's hard can actually become easier. All right, so that takes care of the right hand. I didn't go thoroughly through all the rhythms and counting, but I did, especially in the chorus on measure 9, just so you could hear those dotted quarter notes followed by eighth notes to ensure that those are very clean and clear, because that's the only spot in the piece that happens. And the chorus, again, is the most important part of the song. Not that we want to mess any of the other rhythms up, but that is a distinct area where the rhythms are unique in this piece. Now the left hand, like I said, starts with melody. Your left hand, notice there's 3 on B. Well, if you start your left hand with the G position right here, you're actually going to be outlining the first 2 lines of this piece. So that's pretty cool. So when you start the piece with both hands, your thumb in the right hand's on E, your thumb in the left hand's on D. So it's pretty close quarters. So that's going to be a little tricky just playing close like that. And there's actually a spot where it gets even tighter, but we'll get to that in just a little bit when we do both hands. So let's focus on the left hand here. As I said earlier, this is a pickup measure, an incomplete measure. So it's 4 and your left hand has 2 eighth notes, the B and the C, and then beat 1 of the next measure is a G and D, which you're going to hold for 2 counts because it's a half note. So the piece starts 4 and 1 and 2 and. Now that's melody. You can see the words are above those notes in the left hand. Now it says mezzo piano at the beginning, which is fairly soft. You might almost bring that up to a mezzo forte because it's melody. Now, when you continue in the left hand, you want to play a little softer because it's no longer melody. The right hand picks it up. But you definitely want to have a strong, confident start because our melody is starting the piece right away. So I certainly wouldn't be bashful with bringing that out. Now, on beat 3 in the left hand on the second measure, third finger on B. So the second measure is the G chord. You're just playing G and D on beats 1 and 2, and then the filler note B by itself on beats 3 and 4 and. The last measure, your fourth finger's on A, and then you have C and D with 2 and 1. The last 2 notes of this measure, this is melody again. Notice the right hand is resting. So those are eighth notes, A with your fourth finger, B, and then the third measure, C, it's also melody. And then the right hand takes over. So now you're going to back off when you hit C and D. In measure 4, you're down to a G, a B, and a B. Measure 4 on beat 4, now you have melody again. So there's a pattern here where the melody keeps coming in occasionally on the last 2 notes, beat 4 of these measures. And that's just like the beginning again. Same notes, same rhythm. 4 and. But the G and D this time are held for 4 counts in measure 5. Now measure 6 is the first time the left hand has a little finger change. Your 2 should already be on C, which you're going to play, but your thumb is going to come up to E. So it's a slight change. Now that's 2 counts. Now I advise when you do this, you come up into the keys closer to the black keys. Why? When you go to E flat on beat 3, your thumb is right there. So I've talked about this before. If you're down here, look how far the thumb has to travel. But here, you can practically feel it before you play it. So that's an advantage. Measure 7, your thumb basically just slides down to D on beats 1 and 2 and then beats 3 and 4 and is C and D. And then the last measure, measure 8, you have a B, D, and G. You outlined a G chord here. B, D, and G. Notice the staccato on B and D, and then G's a half note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now be careful with staccato, you don't rush it. It's short, yes, but you still have to count it out. You can't go, because if I put in the counting, that would be 1 and 2 and 3 and, but the G comes in on beat 3, so it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So when you're doing ands and you count the and of beat 1 and you're doing the left hand by itself, there's silence there, right? Because of the staccato. If I didn't have staccato, it would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. With staccato, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So very important we do that, especially moving forward in the left hand, because now the chorus, the next 4 measures, has staccato. There's a pattern here, a rhythmic pattern. You're going to, at measure 9, you're going to rest on beat 1, play the chord on beat 2, rest on beat 3, play the chord on beat 4. It's the same in measure 10. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now the chords in measure 9 are the G chord. And of course the staccato that we talked about. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and. Now here in measure 10, this is the D7 chord. Remember F sharp, all F's are sharped, C and D. Same pattern though, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Same thing in measure 11, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Measure 12, it's like measure 9, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So going back to the G chord. Measure 13, it changes. Changes quite a bit actually. We have something new here. 13, you've got a rest on beat 1. Beat 2, you've got this G, so hang out there with the pinky. Your thumb is going to stretch up to an F natural. That's a high F. We've not seen that F before in the bass clef. That's one of the highest notes you're going to probably see in the bass clef. If you look carefully, so they've given you that it's an F, but the reason it's an F is because it's above the second ledger line above the bass clef. So one ledger line above the bass clef is C. The note above that would be D. 2 ledger lines would be E, and then the space note above that, which this note is F. And it's an F natural, not an F sharp. So you're hitting a G and F, which is the interval of a seventh, just shy of an octave. So it's almost an octave, but not quite. So that comes in on beat 2, and it's a dotted half note. So it's 2 and 3 and 4 and. Measure 14, keep your G there with your 5th finger. Your thumb comes down to E. So you have G and E. 2 counts. Now it's the opposite on beat 3. Keep your thumb on the E. You're going to come up to A, but you won't bring your 5 up to A. You just hit it with the 4th finger. It should be there. So 3 and 4 and. Measure 15, you would think your 2 would be on D. Mine is hanging around the C here. So if that happens, you're going to have to flip that 2 over quickly. Shouldn't be too difficult, though, to the D. And that's a half note as well, so that gets 2 counts. Now on beat 3, we're back up to that high F, and they're reminding us it's an F sharp. That's why it's in parentheses. When you played it at measure 13, it was an F natural, but it's an F sharp. Now that's a little bit harder in some ways because you're going further over on the keyboard. You're also coming further up. So the higher up you play this D with your second finger, the closer your thumb will be the F sharp. If you're down here, I don't think you'll be down there. But if you are, look how far, especially if my thumb is off the piano. That's never good. So I don't think you'd ever be playing down there. But my point is, if you're up here, this is easier to reach. Now going into measure 16, this is tough. You got a big jump, more than an octave. You're up here on this F sharp. You've got 1 beat of rest, so you have time to make the jump. You're going to take that thumb and go down to D. Here's what I recommend. This will set you up for like the next several measures. Don't just aim for your thumb on the D. Aim for the G position down here. Because the next several measures, you're going to be playing in that position. So you're on this F sharp. You're going to practice going down to this G position. So if that's the case, instead of maybe aiming for your thumb on the D, you could aim for the 5 on the G. Now that's tricky because don't be tempted to play the G, and you certainly don't want to take emphasis off the D. The other thing is the D is staccato, so you don't want to put so much staccato and lift your hand completely off the piano. You want the staccato like that. You want to maintain that G position, especially since you're playing D to G, and then quickly you're playing B, C, and then back to G and D. So you see how that's contained. So yes, you want staccato, but you want to keep the hand close and not far away. So be thinking about the G position, or at least the G chord position when you do this. Regardless, that will take practice if you're not accustomed to making these big jumps. And again, like I said earlier with the right hand, you can do the same thing with the left hand. Close your eyes, aim for it. You may be forced to feel the black keys. And that's okay if it's not perfect. You're kind of memorizing distance is what you're doing. Trying to memorize the distance traveled. And then when you open your eyes, like I said, it's already going to be easier. All right, so you're down here. So remember, staccato on beat 2, and then on D, and then 5 on G. And then quickly, you have melody again. In fact, this is the same thing as the left hand at the very beginning of the piece, except instead of up here, we're down here. Now you want this to be clear because it's melody. But now, going forth, starting on this B, you want to be even softer. The reason is, the lower we are on the piano, the more bass there is, the louder it gets. And remember, at this point, the right hand has the melody. So it's a little tricky because you're starting out loud because you want to bring out the melody. So it's easy to just maintain that, but you don't want to do that. You want to get a little softer. Now, this is a very difficult concept, and it's one they're not even talking about in this book. They're not even mentioning that with any volume markings. But this is actually a really, really good way for musicians to play. Always bring out your melody, no matter where it is, and back off on the non-melodic spots where it's really just background. So keep that in mind right now, that we're going to bring this out, and then when you get to B on beat 3, a little softer. Measure 18, we're going to 4th finger on A, and then beats 2 and 3 are C's and D's, C and D. Beat 4, back to melody. So that's the A, B, C. Measure 19 on beat 3, now C and D a little bit quieter. That's a half note as well. Measure 20 down to G, and then B and D on beats 2 and 3. Melody once again. So here on 21, I'm going to hold this G and D for 4 counts. Now you might be thinking, is it good to hit that loud? Because it's going to stay loud. I'm holding it. That's okay. You don't want to be weak on that, because it technically is still lyrics. It's still melody. So it's all right. It'll start to slowly fade away. And when you do put the right hand, so because it's not busy, the right hand's going to do just a fine job keeping that melody going. So in measure 22, your 2 should be on C. Bring the thumb up to E. So you have C and D for 2 counts. And then slide that thumb down to E flat for 2 counts. Measure 23, the last measure, slide your thumb down to D. So beat 1, you have a D again on 2 and 3. And here's a new note, a full octave down. So 1 ledger line below bass clef is an E. This is right below that. This is a D. So you've just gone from this D to this D. And this one's tied right here. See the little tie marking there? It's going into measure 24. So on beat 1, you're still holding it. Beat 2, you come up to that E I just talked about with your 4th finger. So that's going to be 2 and 3. And now you have an F. And they've marked that one as well. But remember, it's an F sharp. So be ready for that. You may not have played an F sharp that low on the piano before. Measure 25, your 2nd finger's on G. It's a little squeeze right there. But this G is staccato. And as soon as you hit that staccato, you've got on beat 2, so don't rush it, 1 and 2 and 3. And you've got this tricky little maneuver. Thumb on the B, 2 on the A. 2 on the C, excuse me. So a little crossover. And then the thumb comes under and pops off with the staccato on that D. They're 8th notes, so it's a little quick there. So 1 and 2 and 3 and. So you want to practice that several times and just get that in your head. So it's like off, smooth, off. I did the wrong fingering. So if you do that a few times, I think you'll end up kind of memorizing that feel and that rhythm. But it's tricky nevertheless. You rest on beat 4. Last measure, you rest on beat 1. Now it looks like right away you just hit that D again and down to G, but there's an octave lower sign written underneath both of those notes. So after you finish this right here, you're going to jump down here. And that's really the G position, because you're hitting a D and ending on a G. So there's a big jump there you want to practice. You have 2 beats of rest, so that's good. But your right hand is definitely going to be busy. So that last line is tricky in the left hand. There's a lot of different things going on there as well. So you really want to practice that. New notes and those tricky rhythms with the crossovers. All right, now is our time to put the hands together. I'm not going to go into all the counting just yet, but I just kind of want to focus on lining things up. So at the beginning, our hand position, remember the left hand, we said the G position, the right hand sort of in your E position with that 2nd finger on F sharp. So now we're going to focus on bringing out melody wherever that occurs. So the left hand begins, remember we're going to bring that out. And now the right hand has melody. Now remember these half notes. There's a lot of half notes in your left hand in this piece. You want to hold them down. You don't want this to happen. So get used to holding your left hand and your right hand's got more movement. So that's on beat 1. This comes in on beat 2. Both hands on beat 3. The B in the left hand, the G in the right hand. They're both the 3rd finger, so that should feel pretty good. Hold your left hand down as you go into these 8th notes in the right hand. And then both hands in measure 2. Your 4th finger's on A. Your 3rd finger stays right there. G in the right hand. And then C and D in the left hand, F sharp in the right hand. Now that is all the same rhythm, which is pretty cool. So 1 and 2 and 3, and so both hands are playing quarter notes. Beat 4, rest. This is important in the right hand. Rest because your left hand has melody. Now here's where it gets tight. My 2 is on C, as it should be in the left hand. I've got to move down to the D position in the right hand. But look at what happens with the D itself. Your left hand is going to be playing the D next. So your right hand's going to get out of the way. Right hand thumb's got to be up. So I've got the C on beat 1, the A on beat 2, and then C and D and F sharp on beat 3. The right hand continues. And then the next measure, all quarter notes again, both hands. G and E, B and D, B and D. Now notice here the D's in the right hand. So I had to move my left hand thumb out of the way. So let's see that again back at measure 3. I'm here. My right hand thumb is up. Now it switches. So basically as soon as I go to this G, I'm tilting my hand, getting that left hand thumb out of the way. Now on beat 4, we're back to melody. So rest in the right hand. Get that right hand out of the way, and it's going to move up. 2 on the G. So you're holding down that left hand that entire 5th measure. Measure 6, C and the E, rest in the right hand. And then it comes in on beat 2. Be careful where your thumb is in the left hand. That's not too far away because you're going to this E flat and a C in the right hand. And then B and A. Slide to the D in the left hand. You're off in the right hand. And then C. And then all 3 notes together on beat 3. Now here on measure 8, you've got a hold in the right hand, but you've got staccato right there. You may need to practice that because the tendency is either to hold both notes or staccato both notes, but I'm overdoing it a little bit just so you can see. Well, you may have to overdo it to practice it. I really put a lot of weight down here. I do the opposite here. Pop off. So exaggerate it for a little bit if you have to. Small motions are harder to do. They can be done, but you have to start big, I think. So that's tricky, but important to the style. Now we go on to the chorus. Your left hand's already in place. Your right hand moves up. Your thumb comes up to the G. Basically a G position in both hands at this point. So this is where you have a little bit of back and forth. And the left hand's got staccato while the right hand's very smooth. Now when the left hand hits these chords, your right hand's holding a note. So you're not actually playing at the same time when you do that. So it sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and now beat 4 is hard. Beat 4 is exactly what you were doing in measure 8. So both hands are quarter notes on beat 4, but the left hand is staccato. So you're off of it first. So you got to practice that. So again, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so there's a tendency, I think, you might want to bring in the left hand, especially when you're going slow, on beat 3 on these measures instead of beat 4. So be aware of that. That is a possibility. I'm not saying it will happen, but if you catch yourself saying something's off here, that could be it. Now going on measure 11, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so now we have the D7 chord where we're doing this on beat 4. So that's hard too because you're dealing with a black key, so it's a little different than playing all the white keys, so it feels a little different. That might be a little bit challenging there as well. Measure 12 at the top of the next page. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now measure 13. During that rest, you saw I moved into this position. So you got to kind of know where you're going ahead of time. 1 and 2. Now that's not staccato. This is the first time in the chorus that the left hand stays down. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This measure you change your thumb to E while you're going up to C. The G is the same. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Now the only thing that changes on beat 3 is the A, but it's with a weak finger, the 4. The other notes are staying the same. So we're asking, strong fingers. Well, the thumb is a strong finger. We're staying very grounded, if you will, on these notes while we're asking a weak finger to move. So that could be a little tricky. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now here's where the left hand has the melody again, measure 15. So 1 and this is light. See how effective that's going to be? Except I didn't do it with the right finger. So you may encounter the same problem I have here at measure 15. Look where my second finger is. It's hanging out over here. So you got to bring that 2 over. Otherwise, it's very easy to bring the thumb down like I did. But now look, I'm stuck. I got a big jump, which is really going to be, could be sloppy. So bring that 2 over. So you really want to mark that 2. That's important. That's light. And then your F sharp is melody. Keep that light. And then melody goes to this chord. And remember now you got this big jump. And that's just kind of like a little tag for fun. There's no melody down there until right there. So bring that out. And now you're back to your beginning position, except an octave apart. Your right hand, though, is exactly where it was at the beginning of the piece. Now here's where you're going to start keeping that left hand soft. If you keep playing it loud, see what it does? It's almost obnoxious at that point. And it takes away from the melody. So we're going to keep that right hand loud. Now here are the melodies back in the left hand. Now it's in the right hand. Melody in the left hand. Now you're going to hold the left hand for 4 counts, and you got this big jump, 2 on G. Now in measure 22, C in the E, rest in the right hand, and then come in on beat 2. Thumb, E flat, 5 on C. Now here we go. This is going to be very different. Our ending. At least here we have thumbs on D's in both hands, so that's good. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. So there's a pattern of back and forth, back and forth. The left hand and right hand are playing very different series of notes, but rhythmically, there's a pattern back and forth. Now, when I say back and forth, you don't want to do... You've got these holds that are occurring. Now, the holds actually start right away on beat 1 of measure 23. So the right hand is holding for 2 counts while the left hand is playing again on beat 2. But then the left hand's holding. So it's 1 and 2 and then it's holding while the right hand comes on 3 and that holds while the left hand 4 and. Remember, this is tied, this D. Your right hand moves on 1 and then the left hand 2 and then 3 and then 4 and the measure 25. Tricky because once again, you've got this hold in the left hand, staccato in the, hold in the right hand, staccato in the left hand, and then you've got, remember that? Now when you hit this, messed up my fingering. That D right there, look above it, quarter rest. So I would actually sort of staccato both hands at that point. That probably would make it easier and musically effective. The advantage of coming off the right hand like that is you got to hop over anyways, right, to this G and B. So then you have that all by itself. And then staccato down here. Remember, you got to jump down the octave. And then your right hand jumps up. And the last notes are not staccato. So hands separate at measure 23 on is tricky. Hands together is really tricky. A lot going on. The ending is very difficult. Probably the hardest part of this piece. Lots of new stuff there. So you might want to practice that more than anything. And when you do practice, you may want to start there on measure 23 and put a lot of your practice time into that. If that's a hard spot for you. I think it is. But for some of you, you might get it just fine. So that is now going through both hands and making sure everything lines up. Now what I want to do is just play it slowly while counting. I'm going to try my best to keep counting. Usually when I'm counting the entire piece, my throat gets a little dry, so I may drop out here and there. But at least I'll keep the steady rhythm going for you. All right, so from the very beginning, when you have a pickup measure, or pickup notes, in an incomplete measure, it's good to just count off the first 3 counts. That gives you a nice little count off with your tempo. But I'm going to go pretty slow. So here's my starting hand position, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 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 and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 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 and 2, and 3, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, 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 and 3, and then we're off. All right, so one last thing I want to do is just play it through up to tempo, at least my tempo. It says brightly. And you may be very familiar with this song. It's on the Disney ride at Walt Disney World. It's basically the song that never ends. So if you want to annoy someone, I suggest playing this over and over and over again. Although if you're practicing this, you pretty much will. So you might want to practice in isolation. um, so that being said, it's still a fun piece. It's fun to play because of the details like those staccatos and some of those rhythms really do make it kind of fun. And if you can get it up to this faster tempo that I'm going to play, that makes it a lot of fun too. So here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and... Yeah, so it really is a fun arrangement, a great arrangement of this piece. And of course, it's going to take a lot of work to get it up to that speed. Even when I was playing it at that speed, after going through all of it in great detail with you, there's some spots where I felt like I was kind of hanging on a little bit, especially that ending. As fun as that ending is, it's really tricky. Measure 15 in the left hand, I still have the tendency to play that D with my thumb. So you may have noticed I did it and I quickly recovered, but that wasn't a lot of fun to do that. So if I remember to do that 2 on D, that F sharp's a lot easier to get to, especially since they're melody notes. So, all right. So I wish you all the best. Questions, comments, please leave them in the section. I look forward to them. And I wish you all the best as you practice and enjoy this piece. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.